We're chatting to HR specialist Sipho Mabaso about a term called job hugging. This is in the cubicle today, and it's the act of staying in one's current role, not out of satisfaction, but rather maybe fear, uncertainty, and the perceived safety and stability. Sipho, let's speak about this perceived safety and stability, right? Someone is job hugging. They're like, you know what? This is the position I have right now. It helps me pay my bills. I have a child on the way. It helps me feel secure. So I'm going to hold on this for dear life, whether or not I like being here. But around them, there's movement, right? In the office environment, in the organization, there is movement happening while they're the ones that are not moving and everything moves around them. Does that actually create a safe environment or a stable environment, or is this perceived safety not real?
I think it depends on how fast paced the change in that environment is, right? So one disadvantage of job hugging might be career stagnation, right? Again, depending on the nature of industry that you are in. Think of it as well with when I was looking at this topic, I was thinking of government employees, right? So some people get into these roles and they become comfortable. Pure definition of job hugging, where people are like, listen, I don't, 4 o'clock knock off time, I pick up my laptop and I leave, which is different in the private sector, because in the private sector, it's about getting the job done, whether it's 4 o'clock or not. So in certain governmental departments, there might not be any negative sentiments. But in the private sector, you might find yourself staying in the same position whereas your peers are progressing. You might find yourself 3, 5 years later, and we tell you, actually, we don't need your skills anymore because you still have the same set of skills and you've not exposed yourself into other areas. So from that point of view, you are limiting yourself. And one of the fears as well, again, in the private sector is that you are also limiting your earning potential. So it might get to a point where you wake up one day and you decide that actually you're not paid enough. But if you've not developed yourself from a skill point of view, you've not exposed yourself to anything else, then your negotiation power becomes quite limited. So it might be safe to an extent, especially if you work for a stable organization or a big organization, as that's what people are usually looking for. Because in smaller organizations, I think there's less chances of people job hugging. But in bigger organizations where your job scope is limited, that's where you'd find a lot of people taking advantage of this hugging concept.
And then let's speak about those scenarios, right? It's a big organization and a couple of people in each department are job hugging. What does that do to the workplace itself? Because movement in a workplace isn't just about getting flow in and out, but it also might bring new information, more qualified individuals, people who have information from outside that they can bring in new tools into the organization. And if you have quite a number of people in an organization job hugging, does that bring stagnation into the organization itself?
Certainly. So a good mix of talent allows for innovation, allows for great progress, and everything that you've touched on around how we deliver our services and how we operate. So if you've got a group of people that are just staying in their same roles, then it limits our talent pools. So what we do from an HR point of view as well is we've got what we call career pathways and succession. So the idea is that every critical role needs to have people succeeding it, right? People that can be placed into that role, and we work at developing them. So if you've got a business where a lot of people are job hugging and they're not moving and they're not applying themselves to the maximum, then we are limiting what that talent pool is going to look like. And therefore, filling critical roles that are above will become a mission, and it will mean that we always go outside when those opportunities come through. And I think something that you touched on that is quite critical is that we might be limited when it comes to how we think, because people that come from outside always bring in a different way of looking at problems, and therefore problem solving becomes easier. Whereas if we've all been in the same organization, same team that looks the same, we might still be thinking like we did 5 years ago, and therefore limiting the organization of where we could go.
See, there's possibly someone listening to this saying, "I don't care what you guys are saying. This is my job. This one is my job, and nobody's going to remove me unless they fire me or they retrench me. I am not going anywhere." But let's say that time comes, because we have volatile economic times. Sometimes some organization come across volatile situations, and a retrenchment does take place. Are they going to be looking at that job hugger first, saying, "You haven't really contributed anything new for the past 5 years. We don't see any movement from you, so number one on the retrenchment list"?
Certainly, Palesa. It's not black and white.
Yeah.
But one of the key things now is that whenever there's opportunities to save costs or to be more effective, when we're considering restructuring organizations, we don't do what used to be done in the 90s anymore, where it was last in, first out. In that instance, you would be safe. Now what we do is what we look at what we call fit for purpose. So we restructure the organization, we redefine what the new roles look like. And if there's 60% change in what those roles look like, we then say people must reapply for their positions. And when you reapply for your position, this is where we need to know what value have you added? And that can be a great determiner of whether you're going to add value in the new restructured organization. And if you've not been stretching yourself, if you've not been learning new skills, this is where you're going to find yourself disadvantaged because we don't operate with last in, first out anymore.
Yeah.
We work with fit for purpose.
Well, before we wrap up, just really quickly, let's say someone is a job hugger and perhaps they feel like there's nothing wrong with being a job hugger. What are the ways that they can still keep themselves active, but also keep finding some sort of satisfaction in the work they do, even with no plan to leave?
I think it's about thinking around what value are you adding in that position. Sure, we are not saying think about being promoted. We are not saying think about moving into another organization. But are you still adding value? Is your experience adding value? Are you using that maybe to coach other people, add to systems? Because every organization sure still needs somebody that has institutional knowledge. But it's about how do you use that information to add value into the organization. So we are not calling for disruption, but be certain that you are adding value in that space. The danger here comes in when you are comfortable and you're no longer adding value, when you're just doing my job and there's no growth to how you approach your role. There's no embracing of technology. There's no embracing of new ways of doing things.
Yeah.
So that's when it becomes a challenge. So continue to add value, continue to take advantage of your institutional knowledge. And that way we're not asking you to think about being a director, being a future star, or exiting the business. But be certain to add value in that space so that the team still appreciates having somebody like you in that space.
Sipho, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's HR specialist Sipho Maba. So speaking about this term known as job hugging, very interesting one indeed. But